Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you wanted to know what an entire country was secretly terrified of or, what they were quietly hoping for, you wouldn't look at their public social media.
Oh, definitely not. People curate that way too much.
Right. It's all filtered.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't look at what they buy or where they travel either. You'd look at what they whisper to their search engines in the dark.
That is exactly where the truth is.
Yeah. So today we are exploring this really fascinating 2026 data analysis from a platform called Unscrambler.
It's a great data set.
It really is. They use data from Google Trends and also a search analytics tool called Ahrefs to look at exactly what we are typing into the void. This covers January to June of 2026.
Just a really specific recent snapshot.
Exactly. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore the collective American psyche, not through what you're watching or buying, but through the exact words you are desperately trying to define.
Because, it's a completely different way to measure the temperature of a culture. Fundamentally, looking up a definition is an act of vulnerability.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Vulnerability.
Yeah, because it's a private admission that you don't know something.
Yeah.
You sit alone at your computer or you pull out your phone and you are literally asking a machine to explain a concept to you.
Right.
So when you aggregate millions of those private vulnerable moments, you aren't just getting a vocabulary list, you're getting a cultural thermometer.
A cultural thermometer, I like that.
It's a real-time map of the anxieties, the curiosities, and really the blind spots of an entire nation.
I hear that, but let me push back a little before we dive into the actual numbers. Is it actually vulnerability, or are we just, incredibly lazy now?
How do you mean?
Well, sometimes I feel like we just rely on autocomplete to do our thinking for us, Or we're hastily looking up a word just to win an argument in a comment section somewhere. Are we sure this is deep psychological vulnerability and not just pure convenience?
No, that's a fair challenge.
Yeah.
That's a totally fair challenge. If the data show that people were overwhelmingly looking up, how to spell tricky words or defining highly technical jargon, I would completely agree with you.
Right, like looking up how to spell restaurant or whatever.
Exactly. That would just be a utilitarian reflex. But when we get to the actual words Americans are searching for in 2026, we see they aren't looking up simple definitions.
They really aren't.
They're looking up massive, abstract concepts. They are asking the search engine to basically explain human behavior to them.
Wow, yeah.
And asking a machine to explain human behavior is a deeply vulnerable admission that our shared reality is, it's fracturing.
Yeah.
But to truly understand why that is so significant today, we have to understand the mechanism of why we define things in the first place.
Yeah.
The human urge to categorize our world didn't start with a blinking cursor.
No, definitely not. And the Unscrambler source actually takes us back to, the very dawn of writing.
Mm-hmm.
If you travel back to ancient Mesopotamia, specifically to Akkadian and Sumerian-speaking communities, like in the 2nd and 1st millennia BCE, you find the earliest known dictionaries.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is, except they obviously weren't bound books. They were lexical lists painstakingly inscribed onto cuneiform clay tablets.
Right.
And think about that mechanism for a second. Think of those clay tablets like a rudimentary version of Google's algorithm.
No big comparison.
They were trying to index human thought so that if a merchant in one city traded with another, they literally shared the same reality. They were tools built by ancient humans to impose order on a totally chaotic world.
What's fascinating here is how that initial impulse to simply, index commerce or basic translation slowly evolved into indexing culture itself.
Right. It didn't stay just about trade.
Exactly.
Right.
By the 1st century CE in ancient Greece, dictionaries weren't just static lists anymore. They were tracking the evolution of language over time. They were noting how the usage of words shifted as empires expanded and philosophies changed. The dictionary basically became a mirror reflecting the passage of time.
And when you trace that line to the English language, the leaps in scale are just staggering. Like, in 1604, Robert Caudry publishes a table alphabetical, which is considered the first English dictionary.
And how many words did that have?
It had about 3,000 words.
Okay.
But then, just over a century later, in 1755, Samuel Johnson drops a dictionary with 43,000 words.
That is a massive jump.
Right. And then, of course, you hit the 19th century with Noah Webster, who fundamentally standardized American English.
And Noah Webster's contribution is critical to understanding our modern data.
How so?
Well, Webster wasn't just an academic compiling words, right? He was engaging in essentially psychological nation building.
Oh, wow. Nation building.
Yeah. He realized that if a massive, geographically sprawling, newly formed country was going to survive, it needed a unified cognitive framework.
So everyone is literally on the same page.
Exactly. Standardization of spelling and definitions meant that someone in Massachusetts and someone in Georgia possessed the same foundational building blocks of communication.
Bruh.
He essentially forced a shared reality into existence through the dictionary.
But that desire to build a shared reality clearly didn't stop in the 19th century. I mean, if we look at the 2026 Unscrambler data, we are still trying to do exactly what Noah Webster did.
Oh, absolutely.
We're just applying it to our existential dread instead of our spelling. The spokesperson for Unscrambler pointed out a massive shift. They said Americans in 2026 are overwhelmingly searching for abstract concepts over physical objects.
Very telling.
Yeah. The data is dominated by three main categories: emotions, society, and education. We aren't looking up tangible things anymore.
And the abstraction is the entire point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it signals a society that has its basic physical needs met, at least in terms of, basic communication, but is entirely untethered when it comes to values in their inner lives.
Which brings us to the top of the list, and it is a fascinating, almost unsettling pairing.
Oh, this part is amazing.
The number one most searched definition in America between January and June of 2026, with 286,900 searches, is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And coming in at number two, just a breath behind it, with 274,900 searches, is love.
That pairing is practically a poem about the modern human condition.
It really is. The source points out that love has baffled poets and philosophers for centuries, so it completely makes sense that people are still asking a machine, what is love?
Right, that's timeless.
But what does it say about us that gaslighting, a term for psychological manipulation, actually edges out the most foundational human emotion?
It points to a profound crisis of trust.
A crisis of trust, yeah.
Gaslighting, as defined by the source material, is a type of psychological manipulation that involves causing someone to mistrust their own thoughts, memories, and decisions.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The mechanism of gaslighting is the deliberate destruction of someone's personal reality. The fact that this specific term is the most searched word in the country means a massive segment of the population is experiencing or observing situations where they feel their grip on reality is being intentionally distorted.
So they go to Google.
Right. They are turning to a search engine to essentially outsource their sanity. They're asking the algorithm, is this invisible abuse happening to me real? Does it have a name?
And right underneath that desperate search for clarity about manipulation is the search for connection. Love.
Yes.
It paints a picture of a population caught in a brutal psychological tug of war. We are desperate to connect with others, but we are absolutely terrified that those others are manipulating our perception of reality.
It's heartbreaking, honestly.
It is. And what is really striking is that this tension doesn't just exist in our private, romantic, or familial relationships. It scales up immediately into how we view our entire civilization.
And that brings us directly into the second major category identified by Unscrambler, which is societal words.
Right.
When you move away from the emotional terms, the top 25 is heavily populated with massive systemic terminology.
Yeah. And we're about to hit a cluster of highly charged political terms here. Words like fascism, socialism, equity. And just to be completely clear to you listening, we aren't here to debate the politics of these words or to validate any specific ideology.
Absolutely.
We are looking purely at the search behavior as strictly impartial reporters of this data. Because what is truly fascinating here isn't the politics themselves, but the fact that millions of people feel compelled to find an objective baseline for these concepts.
Right. They just want the definition.
Exactly. For example, coming in at number 4 overall, with nearly 265,000 searches, is fascism. And the source defines that via Merriam-Webster as a far-right nationalist political ideology, often including an authoritarian leader who represses critics.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you also have massive search volumes for words like integrity, democracy, and republic.
Yeah.
What we are observing is a society grappling with competing, highly weaponized narratives.
Weaponized narratives, that's exactly what it feels like.
Right. People hear these incredibly weighty historical terms being thrown around constantly, like on social media, in news broadcasts, and political debates, and often they are completely divorced from their original meanings.
So they are retreating to the digital confessional booth to essentially ask, wait, what does this actually mean?
Precisely. You also see empathy at number 3 on the list. representing the ability to understand and share the feelings of another.
Okay, empathy is number 3.
Yeah, but it sits right alongside heavy searches for bias and propaganda. The mechanism at play here is a desperate attempt to reconstruct that shared reality Noah Webster built, but in an environment that feels irreparably fractured.
Wow. Yeah, you can't have a functional debate about the future of a republic if the citizens participating in the debate don't share the same internal definition of the word.
Exactly. The high search volume proves that Americans know they are losing their shared language, and they're trying to rebuild it from the ground up, basically one search at a time.
That macro view of the national anxiety is so intense, but the unscrambler analysis actually goes a layer deeper, breaking down the most searched word definitions state by state.
And frankly, this is where the data gets incredible.
It really is. Think about everything we've just discussed as a national average. But when you lay this state-by-state data out on a map, it acts like a real-time X-ray of the American brain at a specific moment in time.
I love that X-ray analogy.
Thanks. The national data gives us the macro anxieties, but the state data reveals the incredibly localized fingerprints of curiosity.
The regional variations are spectacular because they demonstrate how local environments, economies, and cultures filter those massive national anxieties. You can start to see these distinct groupings.
Like what?
For example, there's a cluster in the South that we might label the Romantics. In Alabama, Kansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the top searched word in every single one of those states is love.
There is something surprisingly optimistic about that.
It's in there.
While the rest of the country is furiously typing in gaslighting and propaganda, you have an entire geographic region quietly, persistently pondering the nature of love.
It's beautiful, really.
But then you move to another lobe of this American brain and you hit the pragmatists.
Yes, the pragmatic states. And they are driven by immediate environmental and economic pressures. So in Arizona, the top search word is inflation.
Makes sense.
In Hawaii and Washington, they're both searching for the definition of revenue.
Okay. And then you have Minnesota and North Dakota, where the top searched word is weather.
Right.
Which at first glance just seems ridiculous. I mean, why is an entire state Googling the definition of weather when they can just look out a window?
Well, it speaks to a psychological need for predictive control.
Predictive control.
Yeah. In environments like Minnesota or North Dakota, where the climate can literally trap you in your house for days or, pose a physical threat, the weather isn't just small talk.
Oh, for sure.
It is a ruling force. So searching for detailed definitions of meteorological terms is a way for the human mind to exert a tiny bit of intellectual control over an uncontrollable environment. If you can define the precise mechanism of a blizzard, it feels slightly less terrifying.
That actually makes total sense. We define things to conquer our fear of them.
Exactly.
But that logical framework kind of falls apart when you get to the highly specific quirks on this list.
The weird ones?
Yeah, the oddities that just make you stare at the spreadsheet, like Maine. The most searched definition in the entire state of Maine is urson, which simply means bear-like.
That is a perfect example of a localized microtrend hijacking the algorithm. I mean, you don't get an entire state searching for ursine out of a sudden philosophical interest in bears.
Exactly. It makes you wonder what happened. Was there like a massive surge in local bear sightings? Did a local politician describe their opponent as ursin in a debate?
It's got to be something like that.
Or look at Montana, where the top search is gouache, which is a specific type of opaque watercolor paint.
Gouache.
Yeah. Why is Montana suddenly hyperfixated on fine arts terminology?
That is so specific.
And Delaware is looking up the medical definition of sepsis.
Okay, that's a bit grim.
Right. And perhaps the most telling quirk of all, Rhode Island's top searched word is Providence.
Which is their capital.
Exactly. They are looking up the definition of their own capital city.
Now that Rhode Island data point is fascinating, it poses a real question about modern identity.
How so?
Well, is an era of overwhelming global news and abstract national anxiety forcing people to hyperfixate on their immediate local reality just to feel grounded?
Oh, wow.
Searching for the definition of the city you literally live in, it suggests a profound need to anchor oneself in something tangible when everything else feels so abstract.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because interspersed with those quirky local searches, you have a distinct cluster of states that Unscrambler identified under the category of education. I call them the academics. Colorado and Idaho's top search word is adjective. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin's top search is metaphor. And Florida and Nevada are both searching for philosophy.
This is perhaps the most revealing cluster of all. It shows a deep hunger to understand the mechanics of communication itself.
Right, because a metaphor isn't just a literary device you learn in the third grade and forget about. A metaphor is our brain's way of using something familiar to understand something completely alien.
Exactly.
The fact that multiple states are making that their top search shows they don't just want to know what a word means. They want to know how they are being spoken to. They're trying to decode the very structure of the information they are consuming every day.
Exactly. When you search for philosophy or metaphor, you are looking for the source code of human thought. You are asking, how do we construct meaning? It suggests that a large swath of the public feels ill-equipped to process the sheer volume of complex information they are bombarded with, and they are returning to the foundational tools of logic and language to cope.
So what does this all mean when we take a step back and look at the thousands of years of history, from cuneiform tablets to Noah Webster, and then we look at the macro-national anxieties about gaslighting and fascism, all the way down to a tiny cluster of people in Maine looking up bears?
It's quite a spectrum.
It really is. I think this data proves that the search bar has evolved into something deeply intimate. It isn't just a utility for finding a plumber or, checking a sports score anymore.
Not at all.
It is a modern confessional booth. It is the one quiet, private space left where we can admit we don't understand the world. We go there to figure out if our relationships are real, to understand the parameters of justice, to decode the language politicians use against us, and to basically parse out the messy, contradictory culture we're living in.
The idea of the search bar as a confessional is a really powerful framework. And it leaves me with the final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, let's hear it.
We talked earlier about how the ancient Greek dictionaries were vital for tracking the evolution of language, showing historians how those ancient minds changed over centuries.
Right.
This raises an important question. How will historians thousands of years from now use our 2026 search data to understand the evolution of us?
Oh, man.
When they excavate this digital artifact, will they see a society that was ultimately seeking connection, driven by their relentless search for the meaning of love and empathy? Or will they conclude that we were a society retreating into isolation and paranoia, defined entirely by our fears of gaslighting propaganda and fractured realities?
That is heavy.
The data gives us the words, but the historical outcome depends entirely on what we choose to do once we finally understand what those words mean.
Wow. Are we using these definitions to build bridges back to each other, or are we just using them to build better armor? That is a brilliant question to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the American mind. We hope this exploration has given you a totally new perspective on those little queries you type into your phone every day.
Next time you search something, you'll definitely think about it.
For sure. Keep questioning the narratives around you, keep seeking your own definitions, and remember that every time you hit search, you are adding your own tiny, vulnerable fingerprint to that massive X-ray of our collective brain. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.